Indicators such as growth, investment and productivity have progressed significantly since the early 2000s, leading to a considerable improvement of the economic situation in African countries. Well, more than 800 top African business leaders converge in Geneva, Switzerland in mid-March for the annual African CEO Forum. I asked Amir Ben Ahmed, the president of the forum, what will be the highlights of the event. So we're now joined live from Paris by Amir Ben Ahmed, the president of the Africa CEO Forum. Amir, thanks for joining us. Now, let's start with an overview of the African economy in 2015. There is differing opinion on growth projections, with some saying that investment and private consumption will drive Africa's economic growth this year. Yet the International Monetary Fund warned that the African economy could be hurt by a slowdown in China and an interest rate hike in the United States. What's your opinion?
Basically, I think the business of prediction is a very tricky business. You can see whether it's in Europe, in the US, in Asia, in Africa, this prediction, they're being recalibrated from month to month. So I don't really think that they are very significant. As far as Africa is concerned, the two questions, because the growth is clearly slowing down. If you look at the mathematics simply, you can see that the international investment is definitely going to slow down, especially in some sectors, the oil sector, the commodity sectors. When you see big companies like Chevron, Exxon, or the mining company Areva or Rio Tinto, they all are decreasing their capital expenditure by as much as 10%. So these are making a lot of billions of dollars that are not going to be spent on the continent. So the real question is how the extent of the decline of growth that we're going to see in Africa, and whether or not, as you mentioned, the private investment is going to pick up. And also what we are really thinking at the Africa CEO Forum is the question is, what are we going to do about it?
We have not seen net oil importers in Africa benefit as they should from low oil prices. What has been the problem?
There's been some focus on the fact that the decrease of oil prices are going to be a relief for non-oil producing country. But you also have to take into account that today almost half of Africa is an oil-producing country or on the verge of being an oil-producing country. So the question of the oil revenues are still a problem for the continent.
Now, 2014 presented Africa with Ebola that shook economies in West Africa to the core. Has the continent learned as far as disaster preparedness is concerned, or are we hanging on a string should another disaster happen?
A lot of countries were very well prepared for that. If you take the case of Ivory Coast, of Senegal, of Nigeria, instead of focusing on the three very weak states that are Liberia, Sierra Leone and Guinea, we should sometime look at the bright side and see how this crisis has been handled by the neighbors, which are countries that we have always think were kind of structured. So I think there's a very positive side in what happened, and also it will definitely, we were talking about the private sector investment, it will be definitely an incentive for the multinational companies, for the multilateral institution and for the governments to try to promote growth in the health sector through private sector investment. We created the forum in 2012 as a private gathering of Africa's top CEO to help them network, also to give a voice to the private sector in its relationship with governments and try to promote a private sector-led growth in Africa. The first edition was dedicated to cover the state of the African private sector. It was in 2012. We have moved on since. In the second edition, we focused on the benchmarking with other emerging markets. And this year, really the focus that we have put is really on the necessity of business reform, especially the ease of doing business, which is going to be one of the main subjects. As you know, if you take the bottom 50 of the doing business index, 36 countries are African, and this is something that has to change.
Amir, doing business in Africa still remains a major concern. Many countries still do not provide a good environment for this. So what needs to be done to improve on this?
This comes from usually, especially in French-speaking Africa, from a culture of public government. And the fact that now a lot of private companies are more and more taking a space in the economy of each country will force government to have discussion with them. The fact that the elections now have to be won mostly fairly put a burden on the government for him to have business results, economic results, have growth. And the only way to have growth is to rely on sound strategic investment, on sound public investment, and on promoting growth within the private sector. So the government will now have to focus on bettering the legal environment, on having sounder fiscal policies, on protecting the right of private sector, on having strategic plans in very targeted industry, and helping private sector being leaders in this specific sectors. So I am sure that the next 5 years will definitely be a moment of improvement.
Now, one of the items to be on focus at the forum is the anticipated urban explosion across Africa. What is your take on the opportunities for the private sector, first, to make business out of it, and second, to guide a more organized process of this?
You have used the right word. You have used the word opportunities. Up until now, the main word that we were using were challenges. That's the way we are going to approach this situation. Urban growth is a fact, and we have already seen some of the political power being shifted slowly to cities, because that's where the businesses are starting to boom. That's where the challenges, whether it is in terms of business, of housing, of financing, of environment, is shifting. So all of these challenges, we think we see them as opportunities, and so that's what we are going to discuss at the Africa CEO Forum.
Amir Ben Ahmed, the president of the Africa CEO Forum, speaking to us earlier.